Up next, we have Nathan Johnson, who is coming to us from the Center for Natural Lands Management, and he is going to be talking about managing Scotch Broom with ecological prescribed fire. So welcome, Nathan, and take it away. And Jen, don't forget to turn off your camera.
You're still muted, Nathan.
Hi, everybody. Let's see, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Great. And there's gonna be some videos in here, which I hope Mike can take over and play when we get to them. It'll be obvious in the presentation when we get to that point. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to run through some lessons that we've learned in the past 15 years or so using prescribed fire extensively for ecological restoration. Broom is obviously a major component of any ecological restoration work we're doing on the prairies here in Western Washington. And I've worked closely with Adam Martin, who gave a presentation yesterday, and Rod Gilbert, who talked just a little bit ago. Primarily, my work is focused on joint base Lewis McChord, so that'll be the geographic extent that I'm talking about here. So just for context of our broader ecological management of the prairies on JBLM, it really starts with the species biologies. Our funding is largely driven by ESA listed species. So we have the Taylor's checker spot, butterfly, the streaked-horned lark, and the Mazama pocket gopher, all of which were listed in the last 10 years. And we're trying to create habitats that will support and sustain those populations so that there are less restrictions on military training. We want to have habitats that support both military training and the species that we're managing for. So, it starts off with the species biology. That's really the driver of what we're doing out there. We define habitat metrics that we think are going to support those species that we can measure, go out and measure them, and then we based on that, we know how close or not we're getting to hitting our targets, and we take actions, whether it's burning or seeding or spraying, to transform the habitats back into what we think the species, our best guess at what the species need for themselves. So that's the context in which we're doing broom control. That's why we are involved in broom control as a Center for Natural Lands Management. So our generalized enhancement pathway, how we get there, from monitoring to assess where we're at with the targets, habitat targets. So those would be things like percent cover of native annual forbs or openness on the landscape. We monitor, see what we need to do. If we decide that we do need to do an enhancement, burning is usually the first step. And then hopefully we get a window where we can herbicide non-native species while the natives remain senesced in the fall. And then we'll come in and seed after the herbicide treatments with native desirable plants that we want, that we've determined meet with the objectives for that species. In the case of the checker spot, it's often larval host plants. And then we come back in and monitor and see how we're doing. So where does broom fit in with that? It really kind of depends. And that's like the context that we're managing within. So we'll get into the details now of exactly how broom fits into this picture, because it informs everything from the monitoring through each step of management. Oftentimes we'll go in and mow before a burn. I think Rod was talking about this well. The flame lengths and Fireline intensity can be really too much for both fire managers and fire personnel on the ground. Reducing the intensity just gives the fire managers more options for when to ignite and how to manage that fire. When you're doing prescribed fire, having options is that's that's what you want. You want to have more options. You want to have more control over what's going on. The more options you have, the more control that you can have over what's going on. So let's go ahead and play that first video if we can.
All right, I'm going to take control, play the videos, and then I will give you control again.
Great. So this is an area that we didn't mow first. You can see the flame lengths in the back there, maybe 20 feet tall. And it's a late season, shoulder season burn that we're conducting here. It's maybe late September, October, after several rain events. And that's not going to give us as good kill on that broom as, you know, burning it in mid-August. But had we been burning in mid-August, we wouldn't have been able to hold that holding line, which is obviously a critical component of doing a controlled burn. It's keeping it where you want it to be burning. Do I get control back now?
Sure. Do you want to see that second video, or are we good?
Yeah, no, let's just go right to that second video.
All right.
And we're kind of running out of real estate up here. So besides this pine that'll point source, once Limas gets a little bit closer, I think Catherine can just work hooks in off of the Romeo side, and we're kind of done up here.
Good copy, we're standing by near the dozer. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, unless there's anything you think there's left to light down there, you could probably bump out.
That's a good copy.
All right. Unfortunately, it seems some folks did not see the video. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what's going on.
Well, I can do my choppy video here too. Let's see. So anyways, this is the first burn. This is the low intensity, relatively low.
We can't see your screen, Nathan.
Oh, okay. All right.
There we go.
All right. Are you seeing my PowerPoint or my desktop?
PowerPoint.
Okay, great. It's in presentation mode.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just show that in case some folks didn't see either video, I'll show them both again in this kind of choppy format here. This was the first burn later in the season after rain, and you can still see the fire intensity is pretty good. And you can imagine what if we had burned, you know, in the heat of summer, what that would look like, even more. So mowing is going to cut down that fire intensity and give fire managers more options. Okay, keep going here. This is the second video, meant to show what it looks like in the heat of summer burning. You can see up in here the really rocking and rolling head fire. The thing about this is it's dangerous. You don't want to put people into there. If you could hear the audio of this video, you'd hear us chattering on the radio constantly, trying to keep track of where each other are. And so it's just not safe to be putting lighters into an area like that. And that's another reason why we oftentimes, when you have big dense broom, we'll be mowing before we light things on fire. Okay. So here's an example where we're not mowing the whole unit wall to wall. We don't necessarily need to do that. we're just going to spot mow to reduce fuels around the habitat characteristics that we want behavior around. So you can see a little patch in there, as well as some here to get mow. And so kind of wall burning, there's really need to mow it completely wall to wall. This spot mowing to break up the density can be completely effective. So mowing to prepare things, there can be some pitfalls with that we've learned over the years. First of all, the mowed debris can be just like mulch, and you need to wait to let this all dry out before you burn it. And then secondarily, once it is dried out, it can really increase the residence time of the fire on your site, which can increase soil impacts, fire severity. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The other thing you got to watch out for is that any of these mowed stobs sticking up will puncture tires very easily, and obviously they're a tripping hazard and a puncture hazard once you do trip. So mowing a second time can be a way to reduce that concern. The next, so mowing to prepare for fire, and then once you burn, an initial burn is going to consume debris. And you can see in the upper photo, this is a spring after a first entry burn here. You get all the dead stalks still there. If you're concerned with habitat structure, like with the streaked hornlock or grassland nesting bird, you would have to come in and mow this broom down. They're not going to like the structure left behind even by the dead broom. If you're going to try to get in here and seed with native forbs, you're going to have to mow that broom down to get the seeding apparatus over the top of it as well. But this is what it can look like the spring following an initial entry. The trouble is that 2 to 3 years later, you've just really stimulated that seed bank, and you're going to have all these germs. And that's what you see in the lower picture here. So you get into a cycle where you need to burn and then burn and then burn because you're stimulating the seed bank each time, and you want to obviously kill off those plants before they are able to set seed. We're lucky on JBLM, we have that as an option. We can come in and do repeated burns. We've learned some lessons going through and doing that. The first one's kind of a minor lesson. If you're just relying on fire, a lot of times in these older Scotch Broom stands, you're not going to have enough grass to carry that fire. And so back in that video I showed you with the second video of a hot burn day, it still wasn't backing. The fire would move with the wind just fine, but the fire that was trying to go against the wind at the other end of the burn unit really wasn't even moving, not even uphill. It moved for fire unusual. And the problem is that there wasn't fine continuous fuels on the ground. There weren't grasses. So you're getting dramatic fire by all means for sure, but you may not get much backing fire in those units, even on a hot, dry day. And if you're trying to burn it on a shoulder season day, you may not get any effect at all. It's like trying to burn under the closed canopy of a forest here. So seeding grasses into these areas is a strategy, clearly a long-term strategy. The bigger deal with a burn strategy, which is again where you do an initial entry, you stimulate the seed bank. It's really great to have that stimulated seed bank there because then you can kill off all those plants in the seed bank at one swipe. But you've got to burn it again. And as you get into this repeated burning cycle, you start to see other changes in the prairie community composition that may not be desirable for your other ecological objectives that you're managing for. So we've been able to quantitatively document that higher severity fires decrease exotic woody cover. So that's good. We're killing the broom, but can increase exotic annuals. And so when I say fire severity, you might be thinking about, like crown fires in eastern parts of the states, but here when we talk severity, we're talking about is soil and thatch consumption. So the you can see that it's a regular pen. We've got 2 or 3 inches of duff that's been charred and consumed in the foreground, along with some moss. And then this white ash area is likely organic soil that's been burned, consumed. This doesn't happen in shoulder season burning, cool season burning nearly as much as it does in the hot, dry parts of the summer once the soil moisture is gone from our sites. But exotic annuals will really love this environment. We don't have many native annuals in the seed bank. We have some that we can seed in, but what comes into these patches is exotic annuals, which can be a huge problem, notably Vulpea species. And we've actually done some lab studies with ovens, cooking the seeds to see what temperatures different species die off at, and you can kill off all the native species and most of the exotic ones. Vulpea doesn't die at temperatures that we see in prescribed fires for the soil. So we're giving a big advantage to Vulpea. If you're getting, you do it once, it's not a huge deal, but you get into a cycle where you're just using fire to control broom, and you can wind up pushing your community and your plant community in directions that aren't desirable for your overall ecological objectives on the site. So seeding natives can combat this, particularly into those burn scars, those higher severity areas. It's a picture of fescue a couple years after just hand seeding a few seeds into this burn scar. What it was a pile of sticks that was out in the prairie. That obviously that pile burned for longer, had higher severity, and seeding fescue into it can help give the exotics something to compete against at least. So an integrated pest management is what we're all working towards here. Mowing when broom is too dense and tall, following up with prescribed fire shortly thereafter is a good way to get that initial seed bank simulation.
Nathan, you've got
you consider mowing in areas where you're not going to ever. Excuse 2 minutes, great. Mowing in areas where you're never going to be able to burn because the smoke, you're too close to residences or I-5. Burning can work really well where there's additional restoration activities that are desired on the site, like seeding. Burning reduces the thatch that can get in the way of those seeds hitting the ground. The seeds are going to need soil seed contact anyhow. Yeah, and then anywhere where you want to avoid herbicide spraying, what I like to do after we burn, that kills off 75 to 9. It could be 100%, but it can be more like 70 a lot of the times. That remaining percentage, you want to come in and spray at that point, because if the first fire didn't kill it, it's much less likely to die in the second or third fire because your fuel loadings are going to be much reduced. So coming in and spraying after a fire, any surviving broom is really important. And then using herbicide, if you find that you do need to extend the interval between your prescribed fires so that you can maintain your other ecological objectives, the community composition, and not push it towards exotic annuals, then you're going to want to invest, if you have the money, in doing some extensive spot spraying on that unit to push your burn return interval out farther. And this is just, we want to, if you're going to rely on spraying in a lot of these units, then you're going to have to expand the season. And so this is just the top picture shows us in winter spraying some broom, and then that same stand of broom in the summertime. You can see where the red line is the transition between what we did for a trial or not. I think we've been using Garland 4 Milestone pretty effectively. The big caveat here is to not spray once the natives have started to come up, and it's really hard to tell those natives for a lot of people. And so February, I think Rod gave February as a good guideline to stop overspraying native prairie. I think that's a good rule of thumb, not to overspray your native prairie after February sometime. So That's all I have. I'll be around for the panel discussion. Looking forward to any questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nathan. And remember, yes, we will be having time for questions at the end.